So these theoretical frameworks come back again and again. So when you are in other classes, as Megan can attest to, because she's taking one of my other ones, you are going to see this. You are going to see it in your LEB 324 class too. We have this term, the science of reading, that you hear again and again. This is like the popular term right now. The science of reading is actually a compendium of current research that goes back about 30 years. So it's what's currently being done, but it's really this big body of research that educators and psychologists and doctors, your brain research people, what do we call those, neuroscientists, have all contributed together. Now, the interesting thing is, because we've had so many medical advances, we really can rely a lot on fMRIs, which are functional brain MRIs, where they actually do an MRI while an individual is reading, and they can see different parts of the brain that light up. And they do these research projects on what parts of the brain are used at different points. Those people who are most skilled at reading, how does their brain light up? How does the brain of a dyslexic student light up? And actually, it shows differently, and that you can retrain the brain to be more effective and become a better reader. So you need to know some of this important brain research so that you can teach. I mean, if we know this, we want to teach kids the most effective way. If we honestly know the best way to teach reading, then we better be teaching that way. It would only make sense. So we have some theoretical frameworks that sort of help explain how the brain learns to read. And this is our most basic one. It's called the simple view of reading. Now, we know that reading is not simple at all, but they've broken it down so we start with it looking pretty simple. And they set it up like a math equation, which always makes me laugh, because here we're talking about reading and we make a math equation for it. It's decoding times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. This is something that you have to know. So write it somewhere so you really remember. Decoding, when you decode something, like you figure it out, and decoding is the phonics part. Can I give you the word cat and you go, oh, I know those letters, I blend them together, cat, that says cat. And so you can just say the word. The language comprehension part is, do you know what a cat is? Like, you can say cat all day long, but if you don't know what a cat is, you're going to have a problem, aren't you? You should be picturing a little pointy-eared, whiskery, furry animal when I say cat. Some people are really strong in language comprehension. You could have a kid enter kindergarten. They can't decode, they can't read the word cat, but they know a ton about cats. They have a cat at home and somebody's read about cats with them. So their language comprehension piece is really strong. You could have somebody who's really good at decoding, but they don't know what the word means. So they figure out really difficult word. They don't have experience with that. I often see this too with students that this is their second language, and they're very, they learn the rules of the language, they can figure it out, but they haven't been exposed to what that word means in English. You have to have both in order to understand what you're reading with reading comprehension. So the science of reading doesn't say just teach them phonics. And it doesn't say just teach them meaning. You have to have equal. And that's why it's set up like a math problem. Because we know that with a math problem, if you multiply anything by 0, what do you get? 0. So you could be fabulous at one of these, like 100% all the time. But if you're 0 on the other one, your reading comprehension ends up being 0. What a shame. because you're really good in one. It just goes to show you with that theoretical framework that you need to make sure you are teaching both in your classroom. A lot of people hear the science of reading and their mind automatically jumps to phonics. And that's because for a long time, there was sort of this misconception that, I'm sorry, I have a hair like right in front of my eye. So I keep trying to like take the hair. Oh, there, we got it. Okay, now I can see. There was this misconception that we put kids in a room with wonderful literature and we read to them and they just love those books so much, they sort of just absorb it all and they start to read them. Usually it doesn't happen like that. Reading is not a natural thing for us. So is it fabulous to have great literature all around us and a rich environment and being read to all the time? Yeah, that's going to help with your language comprehension. But you do need that direct instruction too in order to learn the alphabetic code that you're reading. So you can't just be like, I'm going to have a great classroom library. Do you want a great classroom library? Of course, definitely. But you do have to do that structured instruction as we go along, which brings us to our next reading theory. So this is Scarborough's reading room. You know how researchers are. We all like to come up with a new diagram to explain things. So Hollis Scarborough actually lives in Connecticut. She's still alive and writing and researching. And she decided, okay, rather than the simple view of reading, I need to show that it's really not so simple. So she took two chords and she said, okay, I'm going to take word recognition. That's like the decoding part of simple view, and language comprehension. Those are like the two parts of the simple view of reading. And when they come together to make my strong rope, that is going to be my reading comprehension. But she took those chords and she teased them out into different strands. And she said, you know, when I really look at word recognition, it's made of three parts. It's made of phonological awareness, decoding, and sight word knowledge. So real quick, I'm going to sort of give you a definition of each of those. You might want to jot them down. This PowerPoint is available for you, but I always find it that I remember more if I write it. So phonological awareness is just listening. If I were taking notes right now on this, I'd draw a picture of an ear next to that, because phonological awareness, you can actually do with your eyes closed. You don't even need to see any text. It's all listening for sounds. If I say to you, what are the sounds in the word cat? And you go, at, that's phonological awareness. Being able to hear those sounds. If I say to you, what sound do you hear at the end of the word dog? And you can say g, that's phonological awareness. Can you hear the sounds? Can you separate them out? And so you can do it completely not looking at text. We know that this is a critical foundational skill for being able to read. Kids have to be able to hear the sounds in a word before they can then link them to the letter. So we do a lot of wordplay, we do a lot of rhyming, we do listening for sounds. Very, very important. In fact, individuals who are diagnosed with dyslexia often have a very, very difficult time hearing those sounds. And that's where we go back to when we talk about an intervention for many of them. And we start by, can you hear this sound? And it takes some extra practice for students with dyslexia to be able to really be able to discriminate those sounds. The next one's decoding. That's your phonics. That's, can you link the letter to the sound? You look, you see it's the letter G, you say G. Now, the interesting thing with decoding is knowing the names of the letters actually isn't as important as knowing the sounds of the letters. I can give you the word wag, the dog can wag its tail, and you need to know that W says, not that word W. Like, it's helpful to us, and we do teach kids the names of the letters, but right from the beginning, we're teaching them the sound and the name, so they know both. Really, really important. Then we get to sight word knowledge, and we're going to be talking about this later in the semester, in that sight word knowledge is any word that you read and you know right away, automatically. Hopefully, for all of you, that's pretty much all the words you read. You know, once in a while in your science textbook, you come to one that you have to figure out, but we want kids to automatically recognize those words, to have seen them so many times. We call it orthographic mapping, where it's the pathways in your brain are mapped out that it seems like instantaneous that you know that word. And that becomes really important. So those three parts are your word recognition. And then Scarborough said, well, we have the language comprehension strand, and there are 5 parts to the language comprehension strand. And this is going to be the part that's bringing meaning to those words. So we have background knowledge, language structures, vocabulary, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. Background knowledge is exactly what it sounds like. That's your prior knowledge. It's definitely helpful if you're going to read a book on a beach, if you can picture what a beach is. I remember one of my first jobs was in East Providence at a middle school, and I wrongly assumed that everybody in Rhode Island had been to a beach. And there were a number of kids who hadn't been to a beach. And so you do not have to take, fortunately, all your kids to whatever place it is you're reading about. We have not enough money to put everybody on the plane to take them to a place, but you can show them a picture. You can show them a short little clip. You can make sure that they have that little bit of prior knowledge before they start an in-depth reading. That's where, if a student has been read to growing up, they have a lot of prior background knowledge from other picture books that they've read, which is wonderful. But don't assume, like I did. I learned quickly. Language structures are, think of that as grammar. So do you know, as you're reading, that there's a subject and a verb to make a good sentence there? Can you figure out who the sentence is about? This is going to be the structure of the text. It also could be that when you're reading a narrative fiction story, we have a plot and we have a climax to the plot. But that looks different than if you're reading an informational text, which is going to have your headings. So you're learning the structures, literally the structures of the language and the text. Vocabulary is exactly what it is. And those are the words. Do you know what a cat is? Do you know what that word that you figured out is? Verbal reasoning. This is such a good one that some people like to put off, but I say teach this right from the get-go. This is your inferencing. So this is sort of reading between the lines and figuring out what the author's telling you. So if the author tells you that the detective, gets all these clues, but they don't tell you the answer to something, that's when you are deducing something yourself or inferring something yourself. So you're figuring out from the text. If I say, oh, I left some grapes out in the sun, and I show you a picture of them 2 days later in the sun, and they're all wrinkled and crinkled, and I don't tell you what happened, what could you infer happened to the grapes?
Dried out. Yeah.
What was that? Yeah, I think you're right.
Dried out.
Dried out, yeah, like they shrivel up, and you could say, so why do you think they dried out and shriveled up? You left them out in the hot sun, right? And we know that sun is hot, so it's going to take the moisture away. And we know that shriveled up grapes turn into raisins. So you figured that out. The picture didn't say, well, they sat in the sun, so they dried up. That's what verbal reasoning is. And we can start that at a young age with picture clues and do verbal reasoning with that, and then all the way up to very difficult text. And then literacy knowledge is going to be more knowledge of different genres, different techniques that authors use. So let me think. Literacy knowledge. So the genres, the similes, metaphors, the intricacies of your literature. Okay, so take out your pipe cleaners. Take out your little labels that are like this. You should have 8 different pipe cleaners. You should have 10 labels. I think you'll need a pen also. You can probably guess what we're going to do. We're going to make our own Scarborough's rope, because remember, in this class, we do a lot of what I'm hoping you're going to do with your students, and students learn many different ways. So I went over that with our PowerPoints. Now we're going to be able to create our pipe cleaners. Okay.